The summer sun beat down on the fairgrounds, turning the medieval festival into a sea of bright colors and gleaming metal. Ren wiped sweat from his forehead and took another sip from his water bottle, grateful for the patches of shade cast by the tall oak trees. Around him, people in modern clothes mixed with those in period costumes, creating a strange blend of past and present. Ren wasn't like most visitors who came for the turkey legs and jousting shows. He had always been drawn to the craftwork, the things most people walked past without a second glance. While his friends teased him about his boring hobby, Ren found peace in studying the small details that told stories of times long gone. "You heading to the food court?" asked his roommate Jin, already eyeing the lines forming at the various food stalls. "You go ahead," Ren said, spotting a small booth at the far end of the crafts section. "I want to check out some of the armor displays first." Jin rolled his eyes good-naturedly. "Of course you do. Text me when your history nerd session is over, and we'll meet up for the archery contest." Ren nodded and made his way through the crowd, past jewelry makers and leather workers, until he reached the less crowded section where blacksmiths and armorers displayed their work. Most booths had the same kind of items: decorative swords that couldn't cut butter, helmets made more for hanging on walls than actual protection. But one stand caught his eye immediately. Unlike the others with their flashy, unrealistic pieces, this display held armor that looked like it had jumped straight from a history book. Each piece showed signs of real craftsmanship, practical design. With subtle decorative elements that didn't sacrifice function, the chainmail had perfectly consistent rings. The leather components were oil-treated in the traditional way. It's not just painted to look aged. Ren stepped closer, forgetting the crowd around him as he examined a particularly impressive breastplate. The metal caught the sunlight, revealing intricate engravings that told the story of a forest hunt. But what really grabbed his attention was how the maker had solved the problem of flexibility at the joints. Something most modern replicas got wrong. "That's not for sale, if that's what you're wondering." The voice startled him, and looked up to find a woman watching him with an amused expression. She was maybe in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical braid and arms corded with muscle that came from real work, not Jim's. She wore a simple linen shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms marked with small burns and scars, the badges of a metal worker. I wasn't," Ren stammered, suddenly aware he'd been staring intensely at the breastplate for who knows how long. "I was just admiring the craftsmanship. The way you've handled the articulation at the shoulder is really impressive. Most people just focus on making armor look good for photos, but this could actually work in combat." The woman's eyebrows rose slightly, her expression shifting from amusement to something more like interest. "You know your armor?" "Just as a hobby," Ren said, feeling heat rise to his face that had nothing to do with the summer temperature. "I studied medieval history in college before ending up in accounting." She looked at him for a long moment, as if reassessing him entirely. "I'm Alara," she finally said, extending a hand that was calloused and strong. "Ren," he replied, shaking her hand. "So, Ren, the accountant who knows medieval armor," she said, lips curving into a half-smile. "What else do you notice about my work?" The question felt like a test. Ren turned back to the display, careful not to touch anything without permission. "Well, you're using historically accurate techniques. These aren't just costume pieces, they're functional reproductions." He pointed to a gauntlet. "The finger. Articulation here, that's 15th century German style, but you've made some modifications to the knuckle plates." Ilara crossed her arms, leaning against the booth's support post. "Go on. In this male coif the rings are riveted, not butted. That's much more time-consuming, but also historically accurate and stronger." Ren looked up. Most people wouldn't bother with that level of detail for a festival piece. Something shifted in Elira's eyes, a spark of what might have been respect. She reached below the table and pulled out a different helmet, one that hadn't been on display. "What about this one?" she asked, placing it on the table between them. Ren carefully picked it up, turning it over in his hands. The weight felt right, not the flimsy lightness of decorative pieces. "This is beautiful work. Late 14th century bassinet with a removable visor. The hinges are..." It trailed off, noticing something unusual. "Wait, you've modified the traditional design. The breathing holes are arranged differently." Alara smiled. A real smile this time. Good eye. Most people just see a medieval helmet. They don't notice the adjustments I've made for better peripheral vision and breathing. She took the helmet back, her fingers brushing against his. You know what's funny? I've been showing at this festival for 3 years, and you're the first person who's actually understood what they were looking at. A group of teenagers approached the booth, loudly discussing whether the swords would be good for their cosplay photos. Ilara sighed quietly. I'm here all day, she said to Ren, her voice lower so only he could hear. Come back around closing if you want to see the pieces I don't put on display. Real work. Before Ren could respond, she turned to the newcomers with a practiced vendor smile. Looking for anything specific today? Ren stepped back, feeling like he'd just been given a password to a secret club. He watched as Ilara patiently explained to the teenagers why her swords cost more than the mass-produced ones 3 booths down. As he walked away to find Jin, Ren checked the time. 5 hours until the festival closed. 5 hours until he could see what Ilara meant by the real work. For the first time since arriving, the jousting tournament and archery contest didn't seem all that interesting anymore. Something about the way Ilara had looked at him, first with amusement when she caught him staring at her armor, then with that spark of professional interest, had shifted the entire day's focus. Ren couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this kind of anticipation. His mind kept returning to the details of her work, the precision of the rivets, the clever modifications to traditional designs, and beneath all that, the lingering question, what did she mean by the real work, and why did she want to show it to him? The festival grounds looked different as the day wound down. Most visitors had already left, and vendors were starting to pack up their wares. The setting sun cast long shadows across the field, giving everything a golden glow that made them medieval. Setup feel almost real. Ren checked his phone again 5 minutes until official closing time. Jin had left an hour ago, claiming he had actual fun plans for the evening. Ren had barely noticed his friend's teasing, his mind too preoccupied. With thoughts of Ilara's invitation, he approached her booth slowly, suddenly feeling unsure. Maybe she'd just been being polite. Maybe she'd forgotten about him entirely. The doubt nearly made him turn around, but then he saw her. Ilara was carefully wrapping pieces of armor in cloth, her movements precise and practiced. She looked up as he approached, and a small smile formed on her lips. You actually came back, she said, sounding genuinely pleased. Most people would have forgotten or gotten distracted by the jousting. I couldn't stop thinking about your work, Ren admitted, especially that modified bassinet. I've never seen craftsmanship like that outside of museums. Lara nodded, finishing with the piece she was wrapping. Help me load these into my truck, and I'll show you something better than what I brought today. For the next 20 minutes, they worked side by side, carefully moving armor and tools into an old blue pickup truck. Ren was surprised by how comfortable. The silence felt between them, broken only by occasional directions from Ilara about what to move next. So, she said finally, closing the truck's tailgate, my workshop is about 15 minutes from here. You can follow me in your car if you want to see where the real work happens. Ren hesitated only briefly. Lead the way. The drive took them out of the city and down winding country roads. Just when Ren was starting to wonder if he'd made a mistake, Ilara's truck turned onto a gravel driveway leading to what looked like an old converted barn. She parked beside the building and waited for him to pull up next to her. Welcome to my workshop, she said simply, unlocking a heavy wooden door. Inside was unlike anything Ren had imagined. The large open space was divided into clear working areas of forge with proper ventilation in one corner, tables for detail work in another, racks of tools organized by type and purpose, and shelves holding pieces in various stages of completion. This is amazing, Ren breathed, taking it all in. You work here alone? Ilara nodded, lighting a few lamps that cast a warm glow around the space. I had an apprentice last year, but he decided armor making wasn't for him, said it was too much work for too little recognition. She shrugged. He wasn't wrong. She walked to a large cabinet against the far wall and unlocked it with a key she wore around her neck. This is what I wanted to show you. My personal collection pieces I've made for myself, not for selling. The cabinet doors swung open to reveal armor that made the festival pieces look like toys. A complete suit stood in the center, flanked by individual pieces of extraordinary detail gauntlets with perfectly articulated fingers, a gorget with engravings so fine they looked like lace, a helmet with a faceguard shaped like a falcon. "Go ahead," Alara said, noticing Ren's hesitation. "You can touch them. They're meant to be used, not just looked at." Ren carefully lifted a gauntlet, feeling its perfect balance. "Hey, this is ... I don't even have words." "How long did it take you to make that piece?" "About 3 months of evenings," Alara said, leaning against the workbench. "I work a regular job during the day restoration, work for a museum. This is where I come to make what I want to make, not what someone else is paying for." "And what is it you want to make?" Ren asked, carefully returning the gauntlet to its place. Alara was quiet for a moment, considering pieces that tell stories. Armor isn't just protection, it's identity. When knights commissioned armor, they were saying something about themselves, their family, their values. She ran her fingers along the engraved breastplate of the suit. "I try to capture that same feeling." She looked at him suddenly. "What do you do when you're not being an accountant who knows too much about medieval?" "Armor." Ren laughed softly. "Honestly, I read a lot. Visit museums. Sometimes I sketch designs that I know I'll never make." He paused. "My apartment is full of books about historical weaponry and armor. My friends think I'm a bit weird." "Your friends don't understand passion," Alara said simply. She walked to a small refrigerator in the corner and pulled out 2 bottles of water, offering one to Ren. They talked for hours, moving from topic to topic with surprising ease. Ren learned that Alara had studied metallurgy in college before apprenticing with an old-school blacksmith. She learned that Ren had nearly completed a PhD in medieval studies before family pressure pushed him toward a practical career. "No," Alara said, looking at the clock and seeming surprised by how late it had gotten. "I've been thinking about taking on a new apprentice." She paused, watching his reaction carefully. Someone who already understands what they're looking at. Someone who sees the stories in the metal. Ren blinked, not sure if he was understanding correctly. "Are you offering to teach me?" "I'm offering you a chance to learn," she corrected. "It would be evenings and weekends. Hard work, probably some burns and bruises. No pay at first. But if you're serious," she gestured around the workshop, "this could be your world too." Offer hung in the air between them. Ren thought about his cramped cubicle, the endless spreadsheets, the co-workers who talked about nothing but sports and office politics. Then he looked around this space filled with history and craftsmanship and possibility. "When do we start?" he asked. Alara's smile was like sunrise. "How about now? Take off your jacket, and I'll show you how to build a proper fire in the forge." As Ren rolled up his sleeves, he couldn't help thinking how strange life was. This morning, he'd been just another visitor at a medieval festival. Now, watching Alara light the forge with practiced movements, he felt like he'd stumbled through a door he hadn't even known existed. What had begun with him staring too long at a piece of armor had somehow led to this moment standing in a workshop that smelled of metal and fire, about to learn secrets that most people didn't even know existed. "Ready?" Lara asked, holding out a pair of heavy gloves. Ren took them, feeling the weight of the decision and finding it good. "Ready?" The workshop had never felt so alive. With only days left before the competition, Ren and Alara worked in perfect harmony, their movements around each other like a well-practiced dance. The failed prototype that had nearly broken their partnership now sat in the center of their workbench, a reminder of the moment everything changed. "Hand me the small hammer," Alara said, not looking up from the delicate gold wire she was shaping. Ren passed it to her without a word, already anticipating what she needed next. He prepared the special mixture of beeswax and resin would hold the gold in place while she worked. Their new approach had energized them both. Instead of hiding the crack in their armor, they were highlighting it, filling the broken seam with gold in a technique inspired by the Japanese art of kintsugi, which treats damage as part of an object's history rather than something to conceal. "Do you think they'll understand what we're trying to do?" Ren asked, watching as Alara carefully tapped the gold into the prepared crack. She paused, considering the question. "Some will, some won't." Her eyes met his. but we'll know. The competition hall buzzed with activity as crafters from across the country set up their displays. Ren helped Alara unpack their piece, nervous energy making his movements clumsy. "Careful," she murmured as he nearly dropped a toolbox. Deep breaths. Their booth was smaller than Ren had expected, wedged between a master woodcarver and a glass artist whose delicate sculptures caught the light in dazzling patterns. Nearby, a man in his 60s was setting up a display of traditional blacksmith workhorse shoes and farm tools with perfect functionality and simple beauty. "That's Hank Davis," Alara whispered. "He's won this competition 3 times. Old school. Traditional techniques only. He thinks my work is too fancy." Ren watched the older man arrange his pieces with care. "He looks serious." "He is," Alara said, "but he's fair. It's the younger competitors we need to worry about." As if on cue, a group of crafters in their 20s walked by, led by a tall man with carefully styled hair and an expensive leather apron that looked too clean to have seen much actual work. "Well, look who finally made it to the big leagues," the man said, stopping at their booth. "Alara Chen, and who's this? Your assistant?" "My apprentice," Alara corrected, her voice cool. "Ren, this is Pavel. He runs a custom shop in the city." Pavel looked Ren up and down. "Didn't know you were taking on charity cases, Alara?" "Before?" Alara could respond. Another voice cut in. "Some of us believe in passing on knowledge, Pavel, not just hoarding it for profit." It was Hank, the older blacksmith, who had approached without them noticing. Pavel's smile tightened. "Just friendly competition, old man." He turned back to Alara. "Can't wait to see what you've brought this year. Hopefully it's better than last time." After Pavel and his group moved on, Hank shook his head. "That boy has talent but no heart. All flash, no substance." He nodded to Ren. "So you're working with Alara now? Good. She needs someone to keep her grounded." Alara rolled her eyes. But Ren could tell she respected the older craftsman. "Our piece isn't ready for viewing yet. Hank, you'll have to wait for the judging like everyone else." Hank chuckled. "Wouldn't want to spoil the surprise. Good luck to you both." As the day went on, more competitors arrived, each bringing works that showcased years of mastery. Ren felt increasingly out of place, aware of his beginner status among these established crafters. "They're all looking at me like I don't belong here," he said quietly as they took a break for lunch. Alara handed him a sandwich. "I felt the same way at my first competition. Like everyone could tell I was faking it." She took a bite of her own food. "Want to know a secret? Most of them still feel that way sometimes." "Even you?" Ren asked, surprised. Alara's smile was small, but genuine, especially me. That night, back at the workshop, they put the finishing touches on their piece. The armor gleamed under the work lights, its traditional design enhanced by their innovative approach to the joints and the gold-filled crack that now looked intentional, a lightning bolt across the breastplate that caught the eye and told a story of damage transformed into beauty. "It's ready," Alara said, stepping back to view the complete work. Ren stood beside her, seeing not just the final piece, but every moment that had led to its creation, the late nights, the failed attempts, the arguments and breakthroughs, the burns on his hands, and the pride in Alara's eyes when he mastered a difficult technique. "No matter what happens tomorrow," he said, "I'm glad I stared at your armor that day at the festival." Alara laughed, the sound echoing in the quiet workshop. "I'm glad you were obvious enough about it that I noticed." They worked through the night, not on the armor itself, which was complete, but on the presentation, the stand that would hold it, the lighting that would highlight its features, and the written description that would explain their process too. The judges, as dawn broke, they loaded everything into Alara's truck and drove to the competition hall in companionable silence, both lost in their own thoughts about the day ahead. The judging wouldn't begin until afternoon, but competitors were required to have their pieces set up by 9. Ren and Alara worked efficiently, arranging everything according to their plan. "Now, we wait," Alara said once they were finished. The hours crawled by. They took turns walking around the hall, studying other entries and making small talk with competitors. Ren found himself drawn to Hank's display admiring the perfect simplicity of his work. Traditional doesn't have to mean boring, the older man said, noticing Ren's interest. And innovative doesn't have to mean complicated. Remember that. When the announcement came that judging would begin in 30 minutes, Ren's stomach knotted with anxiety. Found Alara standing at their booth, making small adjustments to their display. What if they hate it? He asked, voicing the fear that had been growing all day. Alara straightened a piece that was already perfectly aligned. Then they hate it. But I don't think they will. As the first group of judges approached their booth, Ren felt Alara's hand briefly squeeze his shoulder, a small gesture of reassurance that meant more than any words could have. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. The judges moved slowly through the exhibition hall, spending what felt like hours at each display. Ren's palms were sweaty as he watched them approach. There were 3 judges: a gray-haired woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing, a middle-aged man who asked detailed questions about techniques, and a younger woman who seemed particularly interested in the stories behind each piece. "Tss. Remember," Alara whispered, "let me do most of the talking, but if they ask you directly about the gold, inlay work, that's all yours." Ren nodded, throat too dry for words. The judges finally reached their booth, and the older woman stepped forward first. "Alara Chen," she said with a nod of recognition. "Your work is always interesting. Tell us about this piece." Alara stepped forward confidently, guiding the judges through the armor's design. She explained the traditional elements and the innovative joint work, her voice steady and passionate. Ren watched in admiration. This was Alara in her element, speaking the language of metal and craft with absolute fluency. Then the middle-aged judge pointed to the gold line running across the breastplate. "And this? It looks almost like ... a repair," Alara finished for him, smiling slightly. "In a way it is." She gestured to Ren. "My apprentice can explain this element better than I can." It was his idea. 3 pairs of eyes turned to Ren. The moment of silence stretched until he cleared his throat. "It's inspired by kintsugi," he began, his voice gaining strength as he spoke about something he truly understood. The Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold. They believe that something's history of being broken and repaired becomes part of its beauty, not something to hide. Younger judge leaned closer to examine the work. "So this was actually broken during creation?" Ren nodded. "We had a failure in the metal during stress testing. Traditionally, you'd start over, but we decided to make the repair visible. To celebrate it as part of the piece's journey." The older woman's eyebrows rose slightly. "Bold choice." "Life has cracks," Ren continued, surprising himself with his own words. "It'll break and heal. Armor protects the vulnerable parts of us, but it has its own vulnerabilities too. We wanted to honor that." A small smile played at the corner of the older judge's mouth. "Thank you both. We'll continue our evaluations." As they moved to the next booth, Alara bumped Ren's shoulder with her own. "She's not bad for an accountant," she murmured. "I have a good teacher," he replied. The rest of the day passed in a blur of conversations with other crafters and visitors. Some admired their piece openly, while others, particularly Pavel and his group, made dismissive comments just loud enough to be overheard. "Gold filling a crack. That's just covering up a mistake," Pavel said to his friends. "If you can't get it right the first time, you shouldn't be here." Ren felt his face grow hot, but Alara just shrugged. "Some people never learn the difference between perfection and beauty," she said quietly. As evening approached, competitors and spectators gathered for the awards ceremony. Ren's stomach was in knots as they found seats near the back of the hall. "Place in traditional techniques with modern innovation goes to..." The announcer paused for effect. "Hank Davis, for his adaptable farm tools with ergonomic design." Applause filled the room as the older blacksmith made his way to the stage, looking pleased but not surprised. "Second place goes to... Another dramatic pause. "Pavel Kozlov, for his titanium-infused decorative sword series." Pavel strode to the stage confidently, his smile wide, but his eyes already looking toward the first-place trophy. "In first place in traditional techniques with modern innovation goes to..." Ren held his breath, feeling Alara tense beside him. "Mina Tran, for her self-adjusting clockwork mechanisms." The crowd erupted in applause as a young woman Ren hadn't noticed before made her way to the stage, looking genuinely shocked. Ilara let out her breath slowly. Ren turned to her, trying to read her expression. "I'm sorry," he whispered. She shook her head slightly. "Wait," the head judge stepped forward again. "Before we conclude, we have a special commendation to announce. This award is not given every year, only when the judges unanimously agree that a piece demonstrates exceptional innovation in storytelling through craft." The hall grew quiet. The special commendation for narrative craftsmanship goes to Ilara Chen and her apprentice Ren Taylor for their kintsugi armor that transforms damage into art and tells a story of resilience. For a moment, Ren couldn't process what he was hearing. Ilara stood, pulling him up with her. Together, they walked to the stage, where the gray-haired judge handed them a smaller but beautifully crafted trophy. "This isn't a participation award," the judge said quietly as she shook their hands. "In many ways, it's more significant than the category prizes. You've created something that made us feel something that's rare." After the ceremony, as they carefully packed their piece for transport, a woman in an expensive suit approached their booth. "I'm Lin Wei, curator at the Metropolitan Museum's Medieval Arms and Armor Division," she said, handing Ilara a business card. "We're planning an exhibition on the evolution of protective wear throughout history, the section dedicated to modern interpretations. I'd be very interested in commissioning pieces from both of you." Ilara's eyes widened slightly. "Both of us?" The curator nodded. "The combination of your technical mastery and your apprentice's fresh perspective is exactly what we're looking for. Different voices telling a cohesive story." She smiled. "Call me next week to discuss details." After she left, Ren and Ilara looked at each other in stunned silence. "Did that just happen?" Ren finally asked. "It did," Ilara said, a slow smile spreading across her face. "I told you some people would understand what we were trying to do." Later that night, they celebrated with takeout food in the workshop, the special commendation trophy sitting on the workbench beside them. "You know," Ilara said, putting down her chopsticks, "most people look at armor and see only its function to protect. You saw its story?" She reached under the bench and pulled out a small wooden box. "This is for you." Inside was a hammer, its handle smooth from years of use, the head perfectly balanced. It was a master craftsman's tool. "This was my teacher's," Ilara said quietly. "He gave it to me when I completed my apprenticeship. Now I'm giving it to you." Ren looked up surprised. "But I've only been your apprentice for a few months." Ilara shrugged. "Time doesn't matter. Understanding does." She tapped the trophy. "You proved that today?" As they sat in comfortable silence, Ren thought about how strange life was. 3 months ago, he'd been an accountant who loved history. Now he was sitting in a workshop with a master armorer who had become his teacher, his friend, and maybe something more. All because he'd been caught staring at her armor, and she'd taken that as an invitation to change his life. 3 months passed in a blur of fire and metal. Ren's hands, once soft from keyboard work, grew calloused and strong. His arms ached every night. But it was a good kind of pain, the kind that meant growth. He'd settled into a routine. Accounting. Job during the day, apprenticeship with Ilara in the evenings and on weekends. Tonight. He arrived at the workshop to find Ilara pacing, something he'd never seen her do before. She always moved with purpose, never wasting energy on nervous movement. "Everything okay?" he asked, hanging his jacket on the hook that had somehow become his. Over the past months, Ilara stopped pacing and handed him an envelope. This came. Today, Ren pulled out a heavy cardstock letter with a gold seal at the top. As he read, his eyes widened. "The National Craftsman Competition, and they've invited you personally?" "Not just me," Ilara said, pointing to a line in the middle of the letter. "They've invited me and my apprentice. It's you, by the way." Ren read the letter again. The competition was one of the most prestigious in the country, bringing together master crafters from all fields, blacksmiths, woodworkers, glassblowers, and more. This year's special category was traditional techniques with modern innovation. "This is a big deal," he said, looking up at Ilara. "It's a very big deal," she agreed, taking the letter back. "Winners get funding for their workshops, teaching, opportunities, and commissions from collectors who actually understand what they're buying." She took a deep breath. I've applied 3 times before. Never got in until now. Ren understood why she was pacing. When is it? 8 weeks from now, she said. We need to start immediately. And just like that, their comfortable routine exploded into something new. Ilara sketched designs late into the night, crumpling paper and starting over repeatedly. Ren learned techniques they hadn't planned to cover for months, his hands bleeding more than once as he struggled to keep up. No, like this, Ilara would say, taking tools from his hands to demonstrate for the 3rd or 4th time. Her patience, usually rock solid, grew thin as the deadline loomed closer. One night, after a particularly frustrating session, trying to get the curve of a shoulder plate just right, Ren found himself wondering if he'd made a mistake. Maybe he should have stayed in his safe accounting job, keeping his love of armor as a hobby rather than something that could fail so publicly. We need to talk about the design, Ilara said the next evening, spreading out their latest sketches on the workbench. It's not working. Their competition piece was ambitious. Full upper body armor that combined 15th century Italian styling with modern joint articulation. On paper, it looked impressive. In practice, they kept hitting walls. Maybe we're overthinking it, Ren suggested, studying the sketches. What if we go simpler but focus on one really innovative element? Lara shook her head. The judges expect something spectacular from established crafters. If we go too simple, they'll think I've lost my edge. There it was, the real fear. Ren looked at his teacher with new understanding. Is that what this is about? You're worried? About your reputation? Ilara's eyes flashed with momentary anger, then softened. You don't understand? I've spent 15 years building a name in this field. People know what to expect from my work. And what do they expect? Ren asked quietly. Ilara turned away, focusing on organizing tools that were already perfectly arranged. Excellence, innovation, perfect execution. That sounds exhausting, Ren said before he could stop himself. To his surprise, Ilara laughed a short, surprised sound. It is, she admitted, but it's also who I am. They worked in silence for a while, the tension slowly easing. Later, as they were cleaning up for the night, Ren gathered his courage. Can I ask you something? He said, wiping down his tools. Why did you invite me back that day at the festival? There must have been other people who knew about armor. Lara considered the question as she banked the forge fire. There were, she finally said, but they all wanted to tell me what they knew. You wanted to learn. She shrugged. That's rare. The next few weeks blurred together as they refined their design and began the actual construction. Word got around about their competition entry, bringing unexpected visitors to the workshop. Other crafters curious about the collaboration between the renowned Ilara and her new apprentice. So you're the accountant who caught her eye, said an older man named Thomas, a woodworker who'd known Ilara for years. She's never taken an apprentice so quickly before. Usually makes them beg for months. I didn't beg at all, Ren said suddenly. Wondering if he should have, Thomas laughed. Exactly my point, kid. With 3 weeks to go, disaster struck. A crucial joint in their design, the innovative element they'd been counting on to impress the judges, failed. During stress testing, the metal cracked along a seam that should have held. We need to start over, Ilara said, her voice flat as she examined the broken piece. We don't have time to start over, Ren pointed out. We barely have time to finish this version. They argued that night, their first real fight. Lara insisted on perfection while Ren pushed for practical solutions. They finally parted ways. Without resolving anything, both too stubborn to give in. The next morning, Ren arrived early at the workshop, determination pushing him forward despite the lack of sleep. He found Ilara already there, her eyes red-rimmed but focused as she worked on a new piece of metal. I've been thinking, they both said at the same time, then stopped, surprised. You first, Ilara said, setting down her hammer. Approaching this wrong, Ren said carefully. We've been so focused on meeting expectations that we've lost sight of what made your work. You're special in the first place, telling stories through metal. Lara's expression shifted, a mix of surprise and something harder to name. Go on. What if, Ren said, moving to the workbench and picking up a broken piece from their failed attempt? Instead of hiding our mistakes, we highlight them, make them part of the story. For a long moment, Ilara just looked at him, and slowly, like the sun breaking through clouds, she smiled. That, she said, is exactly what I was thinking too. As competitors from across the country began arriving in town for the upcoming event, Ren and Ilara worked with renewed purpose, their argument forgotten in the excitement of their new approach. Whether they won or lost, they had found something. More valuably, a shared vision that combined her mastery with his fresh perspective. The true challenge was just beginning.